be screwed. Feel my own adrenaline, yeah, I do just what I do, and I hope you let me in, yeah.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 17th part of What If Aizen Finds BEN10 in Bleach Verse. Special note, this fanfic is written in the masterpiece of Bigby the Big Bad Wolf on fanfictionnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. No one had time to react as Ichigo swung his blade. The darkness that was his attack, Getsuga Tensho, flew towards Aizen like a black flame. Just before the attack could consume him, however, a hexagonal barrier appeared behind Aizen. Ichigo saw the barrier before his own attack obscured the renegade Soul Reaper from his view. Did his Getsuga Tensho accomplish anything? It's been a long time. Ichigo flinched at that all too familiar tone, full of condescension mixed with amusement. The darkness began to fade away, revealing a completely unscathed Aizen looking at Ichigo from the corner of his eye. Ryoka boy. Ichigo needed no further incentive to put as much distance between him and Aizen as possible. He had been warned about Aizen's Shikai and had hoped to take him out as quickly as possible. He felt shock and frustration as he noticed the barrier at the back of Aizen's neck slowly diminishing. The attack was good, but the location was poor, Aizen said, a tint of disappointment in his voice. The back of the neck is a living creature's greatest weak point. Did you think I wouldn't prepare some sort of defense in such a spot before heading to battle? I don't know, you tell me. Aizen waved his hand and a rectangular barrier appeared in front of him, blocking the jets of flames that Heat Blast had launched at him. Aizen's eyes widened before his barrier exploded, forcing him backwards as Heat Blast jettisoned himself out of the water. So you can even make your own flames explosive, Aizen noted as he ascended. Such sheer versatility, no wonder you reserved such a transformation. Heat Blast swung his hands, launching what could be best described as discs of fire at the sociopath. Aizen simply chuckled as he dodged and weaved through the blazing projectiles. You can even control the shape of your flames, Aizen said idly. Shale would have loved to research this alien, especially in figuring out how an alien who is essentially living fire could possibly have DNA. Truly your universe is one of wonders beyond even my imagination. Oh stop, you'll make me blush, Heat Blast grumbled as he unleashed another fiery tornado. I mean, you know, if I could blush. Aizen dodged and pointed his finger at Heat Blast. Hado-1, show. Heat Blast cried out as he found himself launched back, and considering he had been floating in midair, gravity decided to prove that she was indeed a harsh MSTRS. Harable and Stack were by his side in an instant the moment he smacked into the ground, creating yet another crater. Heat Blast groaned as he sat up. Anybody get the number of that plane? Since Aizen can't hurt you with his Zanpakuto, he's resorted to using Kaido, Stack noted. Oh, I'm fine, Stack, thanks for asking, Heat Blast grumbled as he rose to his feet. Considering the things I've seen you endure, I had a feeling that wouldn't take you out, Stark said with a shrug. Heat Blast was about to retort when another surge of power filled the air. The three looked up to see that Ichigo had donned a mask similar to the Vizard's. It was a pure white skull mask with two black lines running from the top of his head down each and over each of the eye sockets. His eyes had become yellow while his sclere and pupils became pitch black. Harable let out a sharp intake of breath. So that's why. When Stack and Heat Blast looked at her curiously, she elaborated. When that boy and his friends invaded Las Noches, I sensed him during his battle with Grimjow. Yet as they fought, it felt more like I was sensing a battle between two Espada, rather than one Espada and a Soul Reaper. He's like those Vizards, capable of summoning a hollow mask for extra power, Stark said as Ichigo gripped his Zanpakuto tighter. That alone cannot be why Aizen was interested in him though, Harable said, furrowing her brow as Ichigo launched himself toward Aizen. The boy is powerful, I'll give him that much, but there must be something more. Whatever it is, Stark said, I'll bet only Aizen alone knows. The three then became aware of another presence approaching them. They both turned to see the newcomer, only to stare in amazement. Why you... Neliel too Odelschwank smiled as she stood in front of the two Espada and one Pyronite, her sheathed sword in hand. Nice to finally meet my successor in person. Neliel, you're here too? Heatblast asked. Then he spotted something different about her. Your mask, it's fixed. Indeed it was. The crack had disappeared and the missing chunk of the skull's teeth had been restored. Neliel smiled as she looked up at her mask. It's thanks to Oraheim's power, she said pleasantly. Though I believe the oasis fruits made things easier. Oraheim? Is she okay? Of course she is, Neliel answered. We were both worried about you, so we followed Ichigo and... Anything further was cut short as Ichigo launched his Getsuga Tensho at Aizen once more, Heat Blast shooting backwards to avoid the attack. However, no sooner had the attack shot at Aizen, in a blink of an eye the renegade Soul Reaper had appeared behind Ichigo. What's wrong? Aizen asked in amusement as Ichigo spun around, eyes wide. Oh, were you hoping that Holofying would be enough to finish this in one attack? Benjamin can testify on how presumptuous such a thought is. Ichigo backpedaled away from Aizen, which only amused him more. Why are you putting so much distance between us? If you want to make sure you hit me, you should be getting closer. Or is it that you're afraid closing the distance between us will let even a single part of me out of your sight? Aizen sneered as Ichigo's mask began to dissipate, making out a bead of sweat running down the substitute Soul Reaper's brow. Such a foolish notion. Distance only has meaning in a fight between those who have equal power. Between you and I, distance has no meaning at all. Watch, if I do this. Ichigo felt his heart stop as Aizen appeared right in front of him, his right index and middle finger on Ichigo's chest. I can touch your heart. So what does that say about me? Ichigo and Aizen both shot backwards as Heat Blast propelled himself forward, riding a flaming chunk of rock. Ichigo winced as he felt the heat of the alien shooting past him. Heat Blast stopped himself, the makeshift platform floating in midair by his flames. Oh, Aizen spoke up. Are you implying that because you can close the distance between us that we are equals, Benjamin? Hey, you're the one who said that distance only matters for those with equal power, Heat Blast said, ignoring the fact that Aizen was constantly addressing him by his full name. And more than once you have closed the distance between us with great effect, Aizen stated, his sneer turning back into his familiar smirk as Ichigo stared at them in disbelief. That's right, Benjamin here has succeeded in doing something no other has ever accomplished. He not only hurt me but came so close to possibly defeating me. Ichigo gawked, staring at Heat Blast in shock. The latter simply glared at Aizen. Unfortunately for him that was his best chance, Aizen said with such confidence that Heat Blast's fists tightened. Oh, he did considerable harm to me shortly before you arrived, Kurosaki, but don't assume you can win simply because of that. Keep telling yourself that, Aizen, Heat Blast said dryly before turning toward Ichigo. Good to see you again, Ichigo. Same here, Ichigo said, though he didn't risk taking his eyes off Aizen. Not that I'm complaining, but how did you guys get here? Mayuri Kuratsuchi found a way to create a Garganta, Ichigo replied. I met Neliel, and she said Oraheim was here too. Yeah, they were worried about you and came with me to make sure you were all right. Hachai, Oraheim exclaimed happily as she approached the large vizard, who was currently tending to the wounded. Following her was a female Soul Reaper captain. She had blue eyes and long black hair that was tied in a long braid down her front. Oraheim, Hachai beamed. Thank goodness you're all right. His eyes landed on the captain behind her, and he gave a nod of his head. Greetings, Captain Anohana. Hachai-chan, Captain Anohana said respectfully before she moved to inspect the wounded. Oraheim then spotted the Arankar lingering nearby, her smile slowly vanishing as she recognized them. The four Arankar looked at the ground, shifting their bodies uncomfortably as Oraheim looked at them with uncertainty. I can tell that something has happened between all of you, Hachai said gently. But please, Oraheim, the Arankar no longer serve Aizen. It's true, Apache said quietly, Oraheim blinking in surprise. We want nothing to do with that BSTRD, Miller Rose added with gritted teeth. Although we would not blame you if you're still angry at us, though, Sung Sun spoke up. Charlotte said nothing, simply looking patiently between Oraheim and Harabal's Phyrexione. Oraheim herself looked at them, making them stare at the ground. Finally, she stepped forward, drawing their attention, and gave them a warm smile. I believe you. Now it was the Arankar's turn to blink. Jay, just like that? Miller Rose asked. Oriheim's smile just grew before she looked up in the sky where Ichigo and who could only be Ben floated in the air, her smile replaced with concern. He now went with Captain Onohana to help the wounded. Hatcheye's already taking care of them, but Oriheim's powers will help. Ichigo blinked in surprise at hearing the wizard's name, but regained himself. Captain Onohana, Heat Blast asked. Right, she was the captain of the healing squad. With so many healers here, everyone should be fine. Yeah, Kuretsuchi was insistent on it. Ichigo said, then he looked sheepish. He, wanted to make sure that nothing happened to you before he got a chance to study you. Heat Blast groaned as he remembered the leering face of that creepy, clown soul reaper. How confident you two are to be idly chatting in the midst of a battle. Heat Blast turned around, growling under his breath as Ichigo tightened his grip on his Zanpakuto. How confident you are to just stand there and let us talk. I am allowing you a moment's reprieve, Aizen said nonchalantly. More for Kurosaki's sake than yours. Me? Ichigo repeated in suspicion and guarded curiosity. To what end do you fight me? Aizen inquired of him. Do you have some kind of hatred for me? You shouldn't. Heat Blast and Ichigo both started to speak, but Aizen resumed before they could even get a word out. You yourself said that Oriheim now is safe, and from the look on your face, none of your friends are dead. Considering those facts, are you able to hate me from the bottom of your heart? Aizen dropped his smirk and looked disappointed once again at Ichigo. No, you can't. At the moment, you don't possess any hatred and are simply SWNGNG your sword out of a sense of duty. That will not work against me, for a will to fight without hatred is like an eagle without wings. You can't protect anything with that. Ichigo, don't listen to him, Heat Blast said, seeing the look of anger on Ichigo's face. He's just saying that to mess with you, that's what he does. Can you dispute my claim, Benjamin? Aizen said coolly. I certainly felt your hatred when you attacked me as waybig. Oh, I hate you, Aizen, Heat Blast admitted instantly. I even said so to Stack and Harable. But just because I do doesn't mean I need it'll beat you. Yes, you made your hatred perfectly clear. You hate me for the sake of the Arankar. As noble as always, Benjamin. Heat Blast's flames burned a little hotter as he spoke in a low voice. They trusted you, believed in you, and in the end you never even cared. Trusted me? Aizen repeated in amusement. Believed in me? Something like that is the same as depending on someone. That is something for the weak. We have no use for it. Ichigo scowled and Heat Blast was ready to retort when Aizen cut him off yet again. Never once did I tell the Arankar to trust me. I had told them to follow me, but I never said something such as trust in me and follow me. I always told them never to trust anyone, myself included. Heat Blast was scowling now too, remembering all the times Aizen went out of his way to get his trust. Boy, do I feel special, he muttered under his breath. Sadly, there are not many strong enough to follow such a notion. There was a glint in Aizen's eyes that put the two boys on edge. Take Harable, for example. Out of all the Espada, she sincerely believed in me, despite my warnings. Of course, my attempts to recruit you made me far more convincing. Harable closed her eyes, her predecessor looking at her sympathetically. BSTRD, Apache yelled, ready to fling herself at Aizen if Miller Rose hadn't grabbed her in a lock. The three of them were standing guard over the wounded along with Charlotte. After everything he's done, how dare he talk about Lady Harable that way? Oriheim said nothing, her eyes still fixed on Ichigo and Heat Blast. It cannot be helped, I suppose, Aizen continued. It's natural for living things to find a being greater than themselves and place their trust in that being, following it blindly. In order to escape from the pressure of that trust, those beings will seek out an even greater entity in turn to believe in, and those greater beings will seek beings even greater still. This is how all kings come to be, and this is how all gods are born. Aizen's smirk grew at his two adversaries. Do not believe in me yet, Benjamin Tennyson. I will take my time to teach you and Ichigo Kurosaki the nature of the god whom you face. Believing in me comes after. Oh, I believe all right, Heat Blast said evenly, his body glowing brighter as he held up a flaming fist. I believe you love hearing yourself talk. So how about we skip the bad guy speech and get to the part where I kick your butt already? Ichigo readied his sword in silent agreement. Ben, stop. The two faltered when they found themselves surrounded by Stark, Harable, Neliel, Kamamura, and Shinji. Ichigo blinked at seeing Stark and Harable. As interesting as this conversation is, Shinji interjected, we have more important things to talk about. Aizen wanted you to try and attack him. Ben, Harable warned him. He specializes in provocation, Kamamura said, a dark look on his face directed at said Soul Reaper who was undeterred by the gathering of his enemies. Though you did not attack him in rage as he attempted to have Kurosaki do, your irritation at him might have left you open. For some reason Aizen wants the two of you to fight him, Stark spoke up, earning a shocked look from Ichigo. Which means he's probably gonna go all out now. Which means you two need a plan, Shinji concluded. I hate to say it, but after what happened earlier, I don't think we can help you. What are you talking about? Ichigo questioned him. Aizen used Kyoka Suijutsu on the Soul Reapers and Wizards to make them attack Ben, Harable replied, shocking Ichigo yet again. You, missed a lot, Heat Blast said, rubbing the back of his head. And now that you're here, Ichigo, Shinji said, there's a chance he'll use it on the rest of us. There is also the issue of Wonderwace and those 3 copies of Ben's aliens, Harable pointed out. Ichigo simply slumped forward, looking somewhat in a daze at these revelations. Not to mention Jin Ikamaru, Shinji added, looking around warily. He popped off somewhere during our fight. What about Tozen? Tozen will not be a problem, Kamamura said hesitantly as he lowered his head. Heat Blast paused. I should thank you too, Kamamura said, lifting his head back up. If you two had not attacked Aizen when you had, I might have attacked him in anger and lost my life. Thank you both. You two were, Heat Blast started to say. We will discuss more about it later, Kamamura said. Ichigo Kurosaki, the other captains who went to Hukomondo sent you back first because you have not seen Aizen's Zanpakuto. You haven't either, Ichigo? Heat Blast asked. Ichigo shook his head. Ken told me the same about you. Kamamura nodded. Then the two of you are our best chance against Aizen. Especially since it's too risky to assist you now, Stark said, scowling at Aizen who now sporting a relaxed, patient stance. We can at least make sure that Jin, Wonderwace, and his new companions do not interfere, Harable said. I don't like forcing the two of you to risk your lives when we cannot assist you directly, Kamamura said. But I accept that there is little we can do. Heat Blast made eye contact with Ichigo. You ready for this, Ichigo? We attack Aizen strong and fast so he doesn't know what hit him. I'll take the lead. What? Ichigo asked incredulously. I can't ask you to. Don't worry, I'll keep him distracted since he can't just swing his sword at me, Heat Blast said assuringly. While I get you an opening, you hit him with everything you've got. Will that be enough though? Stark asked. Again, with Aizen's new healing ability. Healing ability? Ichigo parroted, gawking. Did I forget to mention that he's got something like high-speed regeneration now? Heat Blast asked sheepishly. That would have been nice to know, Ichigo hissed with gritted teeth as a vein on the side of his head started throbbing. Even so, Shinji butted in. If you two can injure him enough that he can't use Kyoka Suijutsu, we can jump in and help you finish him off. Can you do it, Ichigo? Heat Blast asked. Ichigo looked at his blade and then at the still smirking Aizen. The substitute Soul Reaper took a breath. I think I can do it. No, I have to do it. And I've got your back, Ichigo, Heat Blast grinned. Let's show Aizen what happens when he messes with our friends. Despite the situation, Ichigo couldn't help but smile. Ben's determination and confidence seemed to be pushing away the fear and uncertainty created by Aizen's presence. He let out a chuckle. You know, you and Ken really are a lot alike. Heat Blast chuckled back. Where do you think he gets it from? Focus, you two, Shinji said hastily. You two are our best hope of stopping Aizen. While we can't do much to help you directly, I might have a way to still lend you a hand. Ichigo and Heat Blast both turned towards him. How? They asked simultaneously. Shinji grinned. Just get Aizen. I'll take care of the rest. If you say so, Heat Blast before turning towards Aizen again, squaring his shoulders. Ben, Harable said suddenly. Yeah? Harable was about to speak but cut herself off, a distant look on her face. When Heat Blast was about to ask what was wrong, Harable shook her head. No, it can wait. When Aizen is defeated, I promise we'll talk. Heat Blast sighed, suspecting what was bothering her. Harable, don't listen to Aizen. He of all people has no right to talk. He then smiled as he held up his fists. Tell you what, I'll make sure to hit him extra strong just for you. I thank you, Harable said finally. We will talk after this. Heat Blast gave her a thumbs up before turning towards Ichigo. Ready? Ichigo nodded. Ready. Heat Blast's fire flared brightly as he glared at Aizen. It's hero time, he shot towards the treacherous Soul Reaper, Ichigo right behind him. Shinji chuckled as he saw them off. He really does say that. Oh man, Mishiro would love hearing that just now. So, what exactly is your plan for helping them? Naliel asked. Shinji chuckled as he patted his shoulder with his Zanpakuto. Back when I was a captain in the 13 court guard squads, that revelation earned surprised looks from the Arrancar. I was always suspicious of Aizen and made him my lieutenant so I could keep an eye on him. But I underestimated Aizen's cunning. He couldn't resist rubbing in my face how I never bothered to open my heart to him, get to know him. At the same time though, it means I never showed him what my Zanpakuto could do. Now all of them, even Kamamura, were curious. Shinji grinned as he held up his sword directly in front of him. Collapse, Sakanade. Go get him, Ben, Apache cheered. You can do it, Mueller Rose shouted. We believe in you, Your Majesty, Charlotte called. If anyone can defeat Aizen, it's you, Sung Sun yelled. Go, Kurosaki, go, Ben, Oriheim chanted, even pumping her fists. While I too am confident that they can win, there's something else that concerns me, Hachai said, drawing their attention. Anohana, can I trust you to look after the others here? We must go and retrieve the others. Others? Anohana asked. My comrades, as well as Yukatake and Kairaku, have been wounded by holofeed versions of Ben's aliens, Hachai explained. Oriheim gasped and Anohana's eyes widened as Hachai turned towards the Arrancar. Alongside an Arrancar who is surprisingly powerful despite not being one of the Espada. Would you happen to be familiar with them? Yeah, those were some of the aliens Ben used while training with us, Apache replied. I am more familiar with the Diamond Head one than the other two, Charlotte answered. However, Wonderwace is a complete mystery to even us, Sung Sun said. All we know for certain is that Aizen had something special in mind for him. May I have your assistance in retrieving the other wounded? Apache looked back up at the standoff between Aizen, Heat Blast, and Ichigo. Catching Mueller Rose's eye, she sighed when said teammate nodded. All right, we've got the most experience here with fighting Ben's aliens, so yeah, we'll help. Hachai bowed his head. Thank you. Do you want me to come? Oriheim inquired. No, Oriheim, Hachai said gently. Stay here with Anohana in case those aliens decide to attack her while she's looking over the injured. Those hollow aliens have proven to be very methodical, so I wouldn't put such tactics past them. Oriheim blinked as she processed Hachai's words. Besides, Hachai added, his tone grim, should anything happen to me, your power will be needed more than ever. Taken aback from Hachai's dismal tone, Oriheim nodded. I understand. Thank you, Oriheim. Hachai turned back towards the Arrancar. Let's get going. Aizen looked as relaxed as ever while the alien hero and substitute Soul Reaper drew closer. Heat Blast swung one arm and then the other, unleashing crescent-shaped waves of fire from each hand. Ichigo blinked in surprise as Aizen dodged the blazing projectiles and raised his left hand. Hyaporankin. Heat Blast barely had time to register that Aizen had not said the type of spell nor its number when a glowing rod of blue-white energy appeared in his hand. Aizen tossed the rod, and in an instant it multiplied into what seemed to be 100 more. Heat Blast raised his hands and shot a massive stream of flame, exploding the rods upon contact. Energy gathered around Ichigo's blade as Heat Blast shot into the smoke when a voice called from behind. Rikuchikoro. Heat Blast cried out as he was suddenly struck in his midsection by 6 beams of light. Despite only being struck in that part of his body, Heat Blast felt completely paralyzed. Oh come on, not again. Ichigo spun to see Aizen standing behind him. Instantly he swung his Zanpakuto. only for Aizen to lazily hold up his free arm. Seki. Just as Ichigo's blade was about to strike him, an orb of blue energy appeared above Aizen's arm. Ichigo couldn't stop himself even if he tried. His Zanpakuto struck the orb and Ichigo himself was blasted back with great force. Aizen raised his sword as if to attack when Heat Blast's body glowed brighter, flames erupting with such force that the 6 pillars were obliterated by the explosion. Heat Blast turned his head and shot a jet of fire from his mouth. Aizen shot higher into the air before thrusting his palm out at Heat Blast. Shakaho. Red light gathering in Aizen's hand was the only warning Heat Blast got, so he leaped into the air as a pillar of red energy shot towards where he had been standing. Ichigo went in for another slash, gritting his teeth as Aizen countered it with another barrier. Byakurai. Ichigo shot to the side, narrowly dodging the bolt of lightning fired from Aizen's fingertip. Sensing movement underneath him, Aizen saw Heat Blast's makeshift platform flying towards him unridden. The former captain swung his sword, cleaving the platform clean in two. Feeling heat from behind him, Aizen ducked. Heat Blast growled as his punch missed and drew his other arm back for a second attempt when Aizen spoke once more. "Show." "I'm getting real sick of that spell," Heat Blast yelled as he was shot back. However, flames engulfed his body, becoming a blazing vortex that soared towards Aizen. Shakaho. Aizen fired another pillar of red energy at the vortex. Much to his shock, the vortex dispersed and revealed itself to be completely devoid of occupation. Aizen kicked suddenly, blocking Ichigo's blade with his foot and earning a stunned look from the substitute Soul Reaper. Just as Aizen was about to follow through, he saw Heat Blast falling towards him, clutching what could only be described as daggers of flame in his hands. Aizen actually looked curiously at the daggers before thrusting his hands outward. Daichai Tenyo. The falling debris that had once been Heat Blast's platform halted their descent and shot towards the alien hero. A burst of flame propelled him forward, but his jaw dropped when the rocks followed him. Heat Blast shot towards Aizen himself with the debris in pursuit. Ichigo flew backwards as Heat Blast spun around, throwing his daggers as crescent flames once again. One was thrown at the debris and the other at Aizen. The first crescent struck the rocks, making them explode into dust. "Heian!" Aizen shouted as he swung his sword, sending a blast of purple energy at the second flame, negating the 2 attacks. Blasting himself higher into the air, Heat Blast raised his hands, fire gathering in his palms and increasing, soon becoming a fireball as big as cannonbolt. Seeing the fireball, Ichigo gathered energy around his Zanpakuto again. "Getsuga Tensho!" he yelled the same time as Heat Blast threw his fireball. The 2 attacks converged, releasing a swirl of fire and darkness into the sky. "This is getting them nowhere," Stark said, frowning. "I've never seen Aizen resort to using so much Kaido at once before," Kamamura commented. "He's toying with them," Shinji said, himself scowling as he remembered Jin's previous words. Probably his way of showing that he doesn't need Kyoka Suijutsu to handle them. "Why isn't Ben going into an ultimate form like he did against Shale and Anoitra?" Meliel asked. "I could ask the same about why that Ichigo kid isn't using his hollow mask," Stalk said. "I'm guessing he can't use it for extended periods of time." "Longer than he used to," Shinji replied. Harable spoke up now. "Ben is no doubt saving his ultimate forms as a last resort, but he might have to use one of them soon." She turned toward Shinji with narrowed eyes. "You seemed confident that your own Zanpakuto's ability could be useful against Aizen." When Shinji gave his release command, the pommel of his Zanpakuto had become a large ring, and the first few inches of the blade had been covered by an extension of the crossguard. The blade has also become straight and slim, with the tip ending in a slanted razor-like edge and 5 holes along its length. Curiously, the sword was actually spinning around Shinji's hand, seemingly under its own power. Shinji's grin returned. "Now that I've got an opening, it's time to use it." "And what exactly is your Zanpakuto capable of, if I may ask?" Kamamura inquired. Shinji's grin grew. "Let's just say that Kyoka Suijutsu isn't the only one with power over people's senses." Heat Blast landed on the ground, Ichigo standing beside him as the combined force of their attacks started to fade away. "Did we get him?" Heat Blast asked. "I don't think so," Ichigo answered warily, causing the 2 to look around anxiously. "Not bad, you two." Neither of you have known each other long, and yet you're fighting quite well together." They both looked up to see Aizen standing in the air above, smirking as usual. He chuckled as the two shifted their stances once more. "However, I can tell the two of you are holding back." Both flinched as Aizen looked towards Ichigo. "You haven't holofied once during that clash. Why? Did you believe that with Benjamin to carry you, you wouldn't need to?" Ichigo grit his teeth at the implications. Before Heat Blast could say anything, Aizen rounded on him next. "Benjamin, you're holding back so you wouldn't accidentally hurt him, aren't you?" Heat Blast cringed as Ichigo shot him a look, first of shock, but then it became apologetic. Heat Blast tried waving his hand to reassure Ichigo. "Ironic that teaming up against me has hindered you more than helped," Aizen continued, returning his attention to Ichigo. "Remember how I said that without hatred, you are like an eagle without wings, Kurosaki. Your efforts here merely prove my point. If you hated me, you would be willing to go all out against me, regardless of your fear. Instead, you linger and allow Benjamin here to put himself more at risk just to grant you an opening. At this moment you are nothing but a weight holding him down." Ichigo became still, his grip on his Zanpakuto slackening. Was it true? Was he just hindering Ben after all? "Okay, seriously, do you come with an off SWCH or something?" Heat Blast shouted, even shaking his fist at Aizen. "You, on the other hand, Benjamin," Aizen said, making Heat Blast growl. "You hate me, yes, but you clearly do not hate me enough. After all, you would be willing to risk hurting your teammate to stop me if that was the case." "Not happening, Aizen," Heat Blast yelled. "Why? You don't know him personally. He's less than an acquaintance, let alone a friend. Why should it matter to you if he gets caught in the crossfire? Besides, considering that Orihime is here, she can easily heal any wounds he suffers. In the end, you aren't making any true sacrifices, so why not come at me with all you've got?" Heat Blast snarled, his fists blazing. Just then, Aizen spun around, blocking a downward slash from none other than Hirako Shinji, though the latter didn't seem upset at his attack being blocked. Shinji flipped over Aizen and in a quick step of Shunpo, appeared above Ichigo and Heat Blast, his sword spinning around his fist again. "So you decided to join us after all," Aizen said, glancing at Shinji's Zanpakuto. "So that is what your Shikai looks like. Quite the interesting appearance." "Oh stop," Shinji smirked at Aizen. "I'm not gonna let you borrow it." Ichigo looked at Shinji questioningly. Heat Blast was a bit less discreet, tilting his head. What exactly was the wizard's plan? Shinji looked down at them. "Come on, you two, don't let Aizen rile you up. Like you said, Ben, he loves hearing himself talk." "Yeah, he does like hearing the sound of his own voice," Heat Blast said before his large eyes widened in inspiration. "Then I've got a sound just for him." Slamming the dial down on the Ultimatrix again, Heat Blast transformed into Echo Echo. Ichigo blinked, leaning forward in disbelief at the tiny alien. If he was about to comment on it, he was cut off when Echo Echo began duplicating himself, causing the substitute Soul Reaper to jump back in surprise. A moment later 10 Echo Echoes stood side by side with each other. "I see. Since Kurosaki has proven to be more of a liability, you have resorted to an alien who can become his own team," Aizen chuckled. "I suppose this could qualify as if you want something done right, do it yourself." "Do you ever shut up?" one Echo Echo cried before all 10 unleashed a sonic scream at Aizen. Just as the Soul Reaper was about to dodge or counter the attack, his eyes widened as he found himself upside down. Or had the world become that way? The fake town loomed above him and the endless sky below. The sight threw him off long enough for the combined sonic attack to hit him, throwing him backwards. The streets of the fake town flew past him when he heard the swishing sound of Shunpo. He lifted his head to see Ichigo flying at him, sword raised. Aizen quickly recovered and brought his own sword up to block the attack. Just as his blade was about to make contact with Ichigo's, his eyes widened as he felt something slicing down his back. He looked over his shoulder and saw Ichigo. Aizen didn't have time to retaliate when another blast of sound hit him. Ichigo swung his sword again. Suspicious, Aizen spun around, blocking Ichigo's diagonal slash. Or so he thought. Ichigo had tried attacking him with a left diagonal slash, but Aizen felt something cut along his right arm. Ichigo pulled back and Aizen followed suit in the hopes of dodging yet another blast of sound. only for a sonic blast to erupt right beneath him, as if he had walked right into it. As Aizen came to a halt some distance away, his eyes landed on the smirking Shinji. "This is your doing, isn't it, Shinji Hirako?" "That's right," Shinji taunted. "Welcome to my inverted world." "Inverted world?" the lead Echo asked. "My sword releases a sweet scent as it spins, allowing me to reverse the senses of whoever smells it. Up is down, left is right, forward is back. Kinda like one of those falling puzzle block games. Pretty cool, huh?" The Echoes all nodded. "Uh-huh. That is pretty cool. Neat. Sounds useful." As you can see, it doesn't only reverse those senses, but one's vision as well as the direction they're hit are also reversed. Ichigo used Shunpo to attack Aizen from the left. Under the effects of Shinji's Zanpakuto, Aizen would assume he was attacking from the right. "No one can fight when all their directions are reversed in their head," Shinji said. "The stronger someone is, the more experienced they are in combat, the more likely their body will react to what they are seeing." "Is that so?" Aizen caught Ichigo's blade, shocking all three of them as his cuts began healing. "I'll admit, I found your power interesting, but it appears to be nothing more than an optical illusion. Compared to my own power, which controls all 5 senses, it is nothing more than a child's game. Your power doesn't mean anything once someone grows accustomed to it, Shinji Hirako. Then maybe it's time to take this to the next level." The lead Echo shouted as his clones all started disappearing into his body. He hit the Ultimatrix dial and the all too familiar spikes popped out. A flash of green light and Ultimate Echo stood before everyone. Both Shinji and Ichigo stared at the evolved Sonoran. "Game on, Aizen." He soared toward Aizen, who looked pleased at seeing the ultimate alien. "Now then, if you're coming at me from the front," he mused, "that means you're actually attacking from behind." He spun around, only to see empty air. The shock barely had time to register on his face as he was thrown forward by a sonic blast. Aizen looked over his shoulder, Ultimate Echo standing where Aizen himself once stood. Behind him, Shinji's grin grew as he held his sword upside down, swinging it back and forth like a pendulum. A noise beside him made Aizen turn his head, only to suddenly find himself surrounded by a ring of Ultimate Echo's discs. "Game over," Ultimate Echo said before unleashing his sonic doom. Ichigo and Shinji watched in amazement as Aizen was trapped in a sphere of ultrasonic waves, his eyes wide and his cries barely audible. Finally Aizen's eyes closed as his body slackened. The sound waves ceased as Aizen began falling. "He did it," Ichigo whispered. "He did it." "Great work, Ben," Shinji called out. Ultimate Echo turned around to look up at him. "Thanks, but we need to hurry up before he recovers. Don't suppose you're good at Kai." A gust of wind and the looks of horror and disbelief on Ichigo and Shinji's faces were the only warning Ultimate Echo received before he felt 2 fingers between his shoulders. "Byakurai." Ultimate Echo screamed as a bolt of lightning shot through him, electricity surging through his body. White filled his vision and all sense of direction went haywire. Finally, the electricity ceased and the whiteness gave way to the fake town. "Ben," Ichigo cried. Ultimate Echo, his body smoking, fell to his knees. In a flash of green light, he turned back into Echo. In another flash, he transformed back into regular Ben. His nerves felt like they were on fire and his skin looked blackened. He became lightheaded and everything was starting to spin. Falling to his hands, Ben weakly turned his head to see a smirking Aizen towering over him. "Game over." Ben struggled to push himself up, his shaky hand inching towards the Ultimatrix. He was just able to see that the dial was red when darkness consumed his vision and he collapsed onto the street. "Taking a point-blank Byakurai and still willing yourself to stand?" Aizen mused. "Truly I must commend your willpower, Benjamin." A shift in the air caused him to look up. Ichigo's spiritual pressure was flaring higher than before, his mask already donned. "Aizen," he yelled, rapidly descending at the nonplussed Soul Reaper. "Ichigo, no!" Shinji shouted. Suddenly a green blur tackled Ichigo, holding him in place. Ichigo thrashed wildly, trying to break free of the hold. "Ichigo, stop!" Ichigo ceased his struggling, finally seeing what the blur was. Neliel was looking at him with a furrowed brow. "Don't! Rushing in like that would have gotten you killed. But Ichigo struggled to protest. We need to fall back, Neliel told him firmly. Neliel too oldischwank, Aizen said idly. I had wondered what had happened to you. Neliel glared at Aizen evenly. The sonic boom of a Sonido behind Aizen alerted him to another presence. He turned to see Sterk scoop Ben up and disappear, but not before shooting him a venomous glare. Ichigo saw this too, but anything he might have said was cut short as another pressure filled the air. He looked up to see Harable above them, a Ciro charging at the tip of her blade and her appealing face livid. Unlike a usual Ciro, this one branched out in jagged lines jutting out all over the orb. Ichigo's eyes widened and he looked at her other hand, barely making out faint drops of BLD dripping from her fingertips. Oh, a Gran Ray Ciro, Aizen observed. Harable swung her sword and unlike her usual Ciro, which came as a wave, the Gran Ray Ciro spun like a razor, compressing and decompressing as it shot toward Aizen. Do you honestly believe that will be? Aizen froze when he heard a growl behind him. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw that Stark had left behind 3 of his wolf constructs. They lunged as Harable's Gran Ray Ciro shot closer. The entire surrounding area was subsequently bathed in yellow and white light. Oriheim's hands flew to her mouth the instant she turned around, seeing Stark carrying the unconscious Ben in his arms. She dashed over as Stark slowly laid Ben down on the ground. The moment she was close, she fell to her knees and cast her orange shield over Ben's body. Sterk took a few steps back, both to give Oriheim space and to avoid making her upset with his presence. He looked around, noticing the lack of Charlotte, Harable's Phyrexione, and Hachigen. Instead, a new Soul Reaper glanced at him before focusing her attention on Ben. No doubt she was Captain Anohana, who Neliel had mentioned earlier. Then Ichigo, Neliel, and Shinji appeared in a blink. The 3 gathered around Oriheim, looking down at Ben anxiously. A boom of Sonido and then Harable had arrived. She cast a wary glance at Anohana, but when the captain made no move to hinder her, the Tres Espada approached Ben. Oriheim finally looked up, locking eyes with Yoriichi. Unaware of what had transpired between the girl and her own subordinates, Harable closed her eyes and bowed her head, hoping to convey her intentions to Oriheim through her actions. She slowly opened her eyes again and blinked when the human girl smiled gently at her. Oriheim then turned toward Stark, that smile still on her face. Despite this encouragement, Stark still hesitated as he spoke. Is he going to be okay? He will, Oriheim answered softly, sounding just as much in relief as the rest. What happened? Everyone turned to see that Hachai had returned along with Charlotte and the girls. In their arms were the other unconscious Soul Reapers and Wizards. Shinji grimaced as he looked over his injured comrades, nearly squawking in indignation as the girls all unceremoniously dropped Love, Rose, and Kensei to gather around Ben. Charlotte had the decency to place down Kairaku as Hachai laid down Mishiro and Yukatik. Is he? Apache started to say. He's fine, Harable reassured her. Thanks to Oriheim and now. Her Fraxian all looked at Oriheim, making her feel slightly awkward as she focused on healing Ben. Apache was the first to move, giving a curt nod. Thank you. Miller Rose and Sung Sun also nodded as Oriheim looked at them again. She smiled once more before turning back toward Ben. Ichigo grit his teeth. Damn it, I'm sorry, Ben. It wasn't your fault, Ichigo, Shinji said. We couldn't have known. I should have followed through with his attack, Ichigo snapped. We should have known Aizen would have prepared something. I thought it was over and Ben paid the price for my mistake. I'm just as much to blame as you are, Shinji argued. I could have bound him with Kaido the moment it looked like he was unconscious. But pinning the blame on someone doesn't help Ben or stop Aizen. We're gonna have to come up with something while Ben recovers. Especially since, he pointed at the red light on the Ultimatrix dial, I don't have a DMN clue about how that thing works, but I'm guessing it means he's out of juice. If we can at least stall Aizen until he's up and running at 100%, then maybe we can still win this. That's not the only problem, Miller Rose said grimly, drawing everyone's attention onto her. What do you mean, Miller Rose? Harable queried, her instincts flaring up. When we went to gather the wounded, we couldn't find Wonderwace or those hollow clones, Sung Sun replied to her leader. Where could they have gone? Perhaps they are waiting for an opportunity to attack, suggested Anohana finally. If these hollow aliens are as tactical as Hachai has claimed them to be, they know better than to risk simply attacking us. Not to mention that Jin Ikamaru is still out there too. Shinji brought a hand to his forehead. So we have them and Aizen to worry about. I hate to say it, but we need to get Ben up as soon as possible. Ben recovering won't make the Ultimatrix recharge any faster, Stark pointed out. Wait, Apache got up in Oraheim's face, startling her. Your power works by returning things to a previous state, right? Can't you just return the Ultimatrix to where it's not out of power? I've never done something like that before, Oraheim sputtered, frantically waving her hands around. While such a thought is hypothetically sound, Hachai spoke, standing beside Oraheim now. Her lack of experience in such matters, combined with the complicated workings of the Ultimatrix, means that I highly recommend against attempting it. Oraheim lowered her head dejectedly. Sorry. Apache rubbed her head guiltily. No, I'm sorry for being pushy. While I agree that it's better to be safe than sorry, Shinji spoke up. With Ben out of commission and Aizen knowing all our tricks, our chances are slipping away. Can you hear me? You motley crew of captains, Arankar, and pseudo-botched Arankar. Oraheim flinched as Aizen's voice boomed through the air. Ichigo and Shinji scowled. Stock, Harable, Neliel, Sung Sun, Charlotte Hachai, and Anohana all narrowed their eyes. Apache and Miller Rose snarled. Of course he survived that attack, Stark muttered under his breath. No doubt you're all wondering how I was able to withstand Ultimate Echo's Sonic Doom attack. Despite the bleakness of their situation, Shinji blinked. Wait, his attack was seriously called Sonic Doom? This earned him a look of annoyance from Ichigo and disbelief from Apache, Miller Rose, and Sung Sun. In fact, you're probably wondering how I even know the name of his attack. Some time ago, I had Benjamin accompany Ulquiorra Cypher on a mission to scout for Vasto Lord. They encountered one and per my instructions, Ulquiorra fell back to see how Benjamin fared against it on his own. What? Apache and Miller Rose screamed. Ulquiorra witnessed Benjamin's transformation into Ultimate Echo and his swift victory over the Vasto Lord. When they returned and he relayed this information to me, I knew precautions would be needed in the event Benjamin used such an alien against me. With Shale's assistance, I created a specialized earplug for such an occasion. This earplug was constructed as a membrane-like substance, designed to immediately close up in reaction to higher decibels. Through much trial and error, not to mention constantly reviewing what Ulquiorra had relayed, we finally succeeded in creating a counter to Ultimate Echo's powers. I made sure to put them into my ears as we were departing for Karakura town. Benjamin, who assumed that Ulquiorra had been separated from him by the Vasto Lord's minions, was none the wiser. No wonder Aizen was so confident when Ben turned into Ultimate Echo, Shinji said quietly. Even without so many powerful healers present, I had no intention of killing Benjamin, Aizen went on. I still intend for him to witness Soul Society's great evil. What the hell is he talking about? Ichigo asked. He's been going on about showing Ben the original sin of Soul Society or something, Apache said with a shrug, earning a look of shock from Anohana. He intends to show Ben Tennyson the Soul King. But why? Shinji asked. Allow Benjamin to rest, for now comes the conclusion to this battle. What does he mean by that? Oraheim nervously. Apache wiped her forehead, frowning as the back of her hand was now moist from sweat. Say, is it just me, or is it getting hotter all of a sudden? At once everyone else became aware of the increase in temperature. They had little time to ponder as they began to hear a large, crackling sound and the air became even hotter. Looking up, they all gasped as a colossal pillar of fire seemed to have materialized out of nowhere. Ichigo, Stack, Shinji, Neliel, and Harable ascended into the air. In front of the pillar was none other than Captain Commander Yamamoto. A few yards away was Aizen himself, looking completely unscathed from Harable and Sterk's combined attack. Either his healing power had easily restored him, or he had managed to escape in a split second. With Aizen, either result was possible. So at last, the Captain Commander graces us with his presence, Aizen said, his voice no longer amplified. But I'm afraid you are too late. If I'm not mistaken, you and Sajin Kamamura are the only relevant captains left capable of fighting. Once both of you fall, the 13 court guard squads will be reduced to 0. It would have been better if you had withdrawn. HMPH, Yamamoto grunted, unimpressed. Don't be conceited, whelp. Do you honestly believe you can cut me down with your strength? I'm not concerned with cutting you down, Aizen said calmly, for I have already done so. Enough nonsense. Yamamoto swung his Zanpakuto, only to be greeted by thin air. He immediately spun around, only to halt as Aizen's Zanpakuto stabbed him straight in the stomach. Old man, Ichigo cried out. At first it seemed that Yamamoto was about to topple over, Aizen sneering down at him. Suddenly Yamamoto's left hand shot out and grabbed Aizen's right. He raised his head to glare up at the traitor. I've got you now. How interesting. You claim you got me, but can you honestly say that's actually my arm you're grabbing? A trick of Kyoka Suijutsu. Perhaps if I was simply relying on my sight and sense of touch, Yamamoto replied as he gripped Aizen's arm tighter. However, there is no mistaking the spiritual pressure of the sword in my gut. You said earlier that I missed my chance. You're wrong. This is my chance. As soon as the words left his lips, more pillars of fire erupted to form a blazing circle. The spectators looked around in shock, namely Ichigo, while the others looked around warily at the pillars, seeing their resemblance to prison bars. Even Aizen seemed stunned by the spectacle. All the structures near the pillars were slowly obliterated through sheer proximity. Reduce all creation to ash, indeed. Enetsu Jigoku. All the battles that have taken place have led to this point. I see, Aizen said as he faced Yamamoto once more. So while your subordinates were falling one by one, you used the opportunity to set this up. Rather cunning of you. Cunning, indeed. Now you and I will die here in this burning hell. Ichigo Kurosaki. Ichigo nearly jumped when Kamamura suddenly appeared amongst them. The captain commander wishes for you to fall back. As you are not a member of the Serite, you cannot get involved in this. As for you Arankar, retreat back to Hukomundo. As you are no longer part of Aizen's army, you are not being seen as enemies of Soul Society right now. Oh, Aizen said, his voice just able to be heard over the roars of the pillars. What of the other squad members? In their current states, they'll most likely be caught up in your attack. They came prepared to lay down their lives, Yamamoto retorted. To do so in order to exterminate a great evil. That is what it means to be part of the 13 court guard squads. Ichigo's eyes widened. Old man, behind you. What? Kamamura turned to see 4 figures suddenly standing behind Yamamoto. MSTR Genrusai. Yamamoto turned immediately, his blazing sword already in mid-swing at the 4 large shadows looming over him. The frontmost figure reached a hand out and gripped his Zanpakuto tightly. Yamamoto's eyes widened marginally when he saw the flames disappear back into his sword. He had little time to react as he felt himself flung through the air, striking the ground. MSTR Genrusai, Kamamura shouted. So that's where they were hiding, Stark said. Ichigo stared at seeing Huko's Brazos, Diamante, and Fuego, who were gathered around Wonderwaste. His shoulders and thighs had grown far larger, his shoulders even popping out upwards like smooth spikes, while his arms and legs were now skinnier than before. He had 4 lines in his abdomen, 3 lines in the 2 lower holes and 2 lines in the upper ones. Finally, the upper part of his face was covered by a tall mask with 3 small horns which covered his eyes so well that they looked like hollow sockets. Wonderwace, the 3 hollow aliens, and Aizen all landed before Yamamoto. Confused as to why the flames of your Zanpakuto were sealed away, Aizen asked, hands in his pockets. In terms of offense, Ryujinjaka is the most powerful Zanpakuto in Soul Society. There's no doubt about that. In a direct fight, I honestly believe its powers would exceed my own. However, if one were to sacrifice all other abilities and specialize in only one, then they would be able to oppose even that incredible power. Several pairs of eyes widened at Aizen's words. Wonderwace Margella is the only modified Arankar. The name of his resurrection is Extinguer. He was created for the sole purpose of countering your Ryujinjaka. This is the end for you, Genrusui Yamamoto. Suddenly, the flaming pillars began to disperse one by one. It is as it appears, Aizen said when he noticed the barest hint of confusion on Yamamoto's face. Extinguer's power is to seal away Ryujinjaka. For this ability, Wonderways sacrificed speech, knowledge, memory, even reasoning itself. Wonderways approached Yamamoto, letting out a faint, incoherent babble as the last of the pillars died away. He gained this ability in exchange for everything he possessed, and you are weaker now because of it. Sacrificed? Exchanged? You stripped him of those things, stole them from him, in exchange for making him into a living weapon, Harem said bitterly, hating Aizen even more than ever. If Wonderways could have consented, I doubt he could have known what you would do to him. If Aizen heard Harem, he ignored her as Wonderways bent his knees, ready to attack. And so I say again, farewell, Genryusui Yamamoto. Wonderways lunged forward, reaching out to grab the Captain Commander. As the modified Arrancar drew nearer, Yamamoto suddenly struck out, slamming his fist into Wonderways' stomach. The spot he had hit crumbled away as Wonderways flew through the air, smashing through multiple buildings. The three hollow aliens stared in shock before disappearing after him. HMPH, Yamamoto said again, his fist still outstretched as Aizen looked back at him. You honestly think you can defeat me just because you suppressed Rujinjaka? How naive, how foolishly naive. Why do you think that I have kept the position of Captain Commander of the 13 Court Guard Squad for 1,000 years? It is because in all those years, no soul reaper stronger than myself has ever been born. He kicked off the ground, landing directly in front of Aizen despite the wound in his stomach. He threw another punch, only for a white blur to strike him first, sending him crashing along the ground. As the Captain Commander tried rising to his feet, he found himself entangled in a great mass of vines. Tilting his head, he saw the injured Wonderways walking towards him, assisted by Diamante and Hugo's Brazos. A white, foam-like substance began oozing from Wonderways' body and covering up the great chunk he had lost. I didn't even hold back, Yamamoto commented. You're quite the lively one. Well then, if Ikatsu was unable to end you. With a great tug, he uprooted the vines and began tearing them off, removing the upper part of his uniform in the process. Underneath was a muscular, heavily scarred body. You're going to be in for quite a lot of hurt. Will that be all right? Was Wonderways' only reply. Ah, that's right, Yamamoto said with slight softness. Your speech was one of the things Aizen stripped from you. The head of the 13 Squad's eyes widened when he felt something stab his side. He looked down to see a large crystal had struck out of the ground, the tip impaling him. A few feet away was Diamante de la Muerte, who sneered at the old Soul Reaper. A great roar, and then Captain Kamamura tackled Diamante, the two grappling furiously. Seijin, Yamamoto called out before Fuego appeared in front of him, blasting him with twin streams of flame at point-blank range. The hollow Methanosian's smug grin fell when the flames cleared and, despite his body being singed, Yamamoto gave him a flat look. Was that it? He asked before punching Fuego right in the face, his head exploding from the force of the blow. The hollow staggered backwards as his head quickly started regenerating. Compared to the flames of Rujinjaka, yours are just candles. Wonderways appeared in front of Yamamoto, the latter leaping into the air as the modified Arrancar struck the ground. No style or stance, nothing but just attacking, Yamamoto wondered. You truly are modified. The air left his lungs when something heavy tackled him, 4 thick arms grabbing his own and holding them in place. He looked over his shoulder to see Hugo's Brazos smirking at him. Hearing movement in front of him, Yamamoto saw Wonderways rushing forward for another attack. Breathing through his nose, the Captain Commander swung his head back, striking Hugo's right in the face. The sudden strike caused the hollow Tetraman to loosen his grip. Yamamoto swung forward, throwing Hugo's over his shoulder and slamming him into Wonderways. A flash of red and Kamamura's giant appeared, its colossal sword raised. Please move, Mstr Genryusui, Kamamura shouted, already shifting his stance to swing his sword, the giant mimicking his movement. Only to grunt as his body became still. Turning to look at his giant, his eyes widened as crystals began to form around the construct's left foot while numerous vines ensnared its right. Kamamura tried to move, but the crystals and vines began rising higher up the giant's legs. Kamamura's ears twitched. He turned around, only to be struck by the fists of both Hugo's and Wonderways, causing him to double over. Seijin, Yamamoto was there in an instant, Hugo's pushing Wonderways out of the way before the Captain Commander could attack. Mstr Genryusui, Kamamura started to speak before his eyes widened. Look out! A green crystal soared towards them, exploding and showering them with fragments. Yamamoto's brow furrowed as the shards struck his skin while Kamamura held his hands out in front of him, the shards pounding against his gauntlets. No sooner had he lowered his arms than a green gas began surrounding them, the wolf captain being forced to cover his nose at the repugnant odor. A finger snap was his only warning before fire covered everything. Seijin, Yamamoto called again. He had managed to escape the explosion, but with his Bankai's legs bound, Kamamura could not. The fires died down to reveal Kamamura's smoking figure. Just as Yamamoto was about to approach him, another crystal shot out behind him, stabbing the captain through his stomach. Yamamoto would have reacted immediately, but something struck him in the side, sending him crashing into the rubble. Before he could rise, something slammed down on him. Hyuko's leered down as he clasped his upper hands together and brought them down on Yamamoto. The captain commander winced but glared at the hollow in irritation more than pain. He shot up, throwing off his assailant, only to find his arms pinned again. He looked over his shoulder to see that it was Wonderwaist. His shoulders seemed to warp before they exploded, unleashing a great multitude of long, white, tentacle-like arms. "Ooh-oh-ah!" Wonderwaist cried as his arms began pounding at the captain commander. "Diamenet, we have to jump in," Shinji said. "How do we know Aizen won't use Kyoka Suichitsu on us the moment we try?" Stark pointed out. Was that all? Everyone froze, and despite lacking any reason or knowledge, even Wonderwaist was surprised by the almost bored tone of Yamamoto as he looked up at the modified Arankar. Well, was it? With a tug, he tore Wonderwaist's main arms clean off his body, the Arankar looking more confused than anything else. Hyuko's growled, lunging at Yamamoto only to be struck by Wonderwaist's disembodied arms. Yamamoto focused back on said Arankar. "At the very least, you don't look like a child anymore. That way I can end you without any remorse." Even with his face covered by his mask, Wonderwaist looked hesitant, fearful, even as Yamamoto shifted his stance. Everything clicked for the three hollow aliens, all three dashing forward frantically. Saokatsu. Yamamoto struck Wonderwaist with both fists now. Time seemed to stop before Wonderwaist was shot back with the force of a cannon. His body once more began crumbling. Only this time it didn't stop at just his stomach. His whole body was falling apart. Wonderwaist let out a wail of what could only be pain and terror. The three hollow aliens stopped in their tracks, horror on their faces as what remained of Wonderwaist's body fell to the ground in pieces. Hyuko's ran over to what was left of Wonderwaist's head. A great chunk of the left half of his face was gone, his mouth still hanging open in fear. Hyuko's fell to his knees as Diamante and Fuego joined him, grief-stricken. Shinji rubbed the back of his head. Ichigo looked on in uncertainty while Stack, Harible, and Nilil appeared downcast at Wonderwaist's fate. Despite not knowing him personally, they knew he certainly did not deserve such a fate. Yamamoto watched as Hyuko's gently put down Wonderwaist's head, recalling the look of fear on the Arankar's face before he had dealt the finishing blow. Poor thing. In the end, he wasn't able to strip away your feelings. Slowly and as one, the three hollow aliens turned towards him, their pain and anguish slowly giving way to sheer rage. Hyuko's clenched all four of his fists and his muscles seemed to bulge. His mouth started moving, and at first all that came out was raspy wheezes. Then at last, he threw back his head and let out a yell in a hoarse, gravelly voice, as if he had never used it before. Hyuko's then pointed all four of his arms at Yamamoto, a zero charging at each end. Yamamoto disappeared in a flash of Shunpo, appearing beside Hyuko's. Just as he was about to strike him down, Diamante morphed his left arm into a shield and struck him across the head. His fists igniting, Fuego rained fiery punch after fiery punch upon the captain commander. Canceling his zero to not shoot at point-blank range, Hyuko's swung all of his arms wildly, bellowing like a mad beast. Yamamoto's power flared, and with a great yell he swung his arm, striking Diamante in the side and pushing him into his allies, knocking all three away from him. "It seems you've upset them, Captain Commander," Aizen said, walking up to them while completely unmoved by the loss of Wonderwaist. "I may not have remorse for what I needed to do," Yamamoto replied, "but I do not take pleasure in it either." "Do you think that will make a difference to them?" Aizen asked as the three hollow aliens rose to their feet. "You killed their precious friend, that's all that matters." I will not waste my time arguing with you, Aizen, Yamamoto snapped as he resumed a fighting stance. This will all be over soon. Arguments? Aizen repeated. You seem to be taking my words lightly. Don't you think that you've forgotten something? Yamamoto eyed him suspiciously. What do you mean? Remember carefully, Aizen said in an almost lecturing tone. I distinctly told you that Extinguer was created solely for sealing the flames of Ryujin Jaka, suppressing them. It sealed the flames within your blade so that new ones couldn't be made. However, those weren't the only flame, were they? Weren't there some other flames you had also released from your sword? Now where do you suppose those flames went? Yamamoto turned around as what was left of Wonderway's head began to expand like some grotesque balloon. He immediately lunged at the Arrancar's remains. Very perceptive, Captain Commander, Aizen said in mock politeness. I'm sure you of all people know what would happen if all that power you had summoned were to explode in a single instant. Yamamoto flung himself onto Wonderwace as the flames that had been sealed away burst forth. Ichigo, Shinji, and the Arrancar all leaped back as a great sphere of flame shot into the sky. At first it seemed like the fire was going to spread throughout the whole town, but the magnificent fireball halted in its expansion. Slowly the fire began to shrink in size. As the flame died, the group surveyed the damage. A sizable crater had been formed by the explosion, a great amount of the area having been completely obliterated. In the epicenter of the crater, pushing himself off the ground, was Captain Commander Yamamoto, his scarred body horribly burnt in numerous spots. Okay, now we need to jump in, Shinji said, raising his sword. Ichigo nodded, bringing a hand to his face, getting ready to summon his mask. Niliel held her sword out in front of her horizontally. Declare, Gamuza. Harable raised her blade as Sterk held out his arms. Energy flowed from his bandoliers and into his hands, taking the form of two blades of pure light. Okay, I'm guessing that wasn't a good thing, Apache said. I'm afraid it seems Aizen was able to get the better of even the Captain Commander, Hachai said bleakly. A beeping noise drew everyone's attention toward the Ultimatrix. The dial's symbol blinked a few times before changing to the all-familiar green. About time, Apache ran to Ben and picked him up by his shirt and started shaking him. Come on, Ben, wake up already. Seriously, how did you even sleep through all that? Apache, Miller Rose groaned as Sung Sun shook her head. Ben feebly opened his eyes. Apache? Then he shook his head with sudden alertness. What happened? Where's Aizen? Oriheim pointed in the direction the others had gone. Oriheim, Ben said, pausing when he noticed that her dress had been torn several times, including her shoulders and the upper part of her arms. Are okay? Oriheim nodded. I'm fine, but please, you have to help the others. Hurry, Ben, Miller Rose urged. That old man's most likely failed, which means Lady Harable and the others are about to fight Aizen. Got it. Ben rose to his feet and activated the Ultimatrix. Switching the dial to Jetray, Ben slammed it down. Once transformed, the amphibian shot into the air. Aizen stood at the edge of the crater, peering down into it. Yamamoto took deep breaths as he pushed himself up to glare at him. The hollow aliens gathered around the other side of the crater, snarling at the weakened form of their hated foe. An explosion of such magnitude, and you were able to reduce so much of the damage. I expected no less from the Captain Commander of the 13 Court Guard squads. If you hadn't suppressed the explosion with your own body, not only would your fragile little barrier have been destroyed, but so would an area even greater than Karakura town itself. You have my thanks, Genryusai Yamamoto. Because of you, my world has been saved. DMN you, Yamamoto wheezed. Leisurely, Aizen descended into the crater, drawing his sword as he did so. Genryusai Yamamoto, I will not refuse to take your life. You alone are the embodiment of Soul Society's very history. He stood directly in front of Yamamoto. As such, you alone will die by my blade. He gasped when Yamamoto's left arm grabbed him by the leg. Quit making me repeat myself, you little whelp, Yamamoto said in complete defiance. You are too naive. Hado-96, Itokaso. A crack running along Yamamoto's arm was the only warning Aizen got. The hollow aliens flew backwards as a pillar of crimson energy rose from the crater, causing even more devastation to the surrounding area and obliterating whatever buildings had previously remained. Aizen shot out of the pillar, his clothes even more burnt and tattered, frustrated. He had not expected that Yamamoto would use his arm to resort to such a Kaido spell. As Aizen landed on the rooftop of a slightly toppled skyscraper, he looked up to see Ichigo, wearing his hollow mask, hovering above him. Getsuga Tensho. The darkness struck Aizen, cutting from his left shoulder down, straight through the building itself. Aizen staggered as the skyscraper started to split in two. "I'm not done yet," Ichigo said, his voice distorted and sinister sounding. He lunged for another attack, but Aizen dodged behind Ichigo, who quickly spun as he started up his attack again. Their blades clashed, the force itself sending Ichigo's attack striking behind him, striking multiple areas like gigantic blotches of ink. Shinji, Starrick, Harable, and Neliel appeared behind Aizen. Shinji was once again wearing his hollow mask and Neliel had entered her released state. She now looked like a centaur with a white ring at the base of her tail. Her mask's horns were longer and more curved while her shoulders were covered by white armor that stretched across her shoulder blade to her neck. Neliel also sported white elbow guards and gauntlets, black cloth covering the parts of her arms and hands that were not armored. In her hands was a large, double-sided lance. Shinji swung first only to be countered by Diamante's right arm who was knocked back by a blast of Harable's Lagoda. Hukos, once more armed with his crystal shards, tried to impale her, only to be blocked by Stark's swords. Fuego tried to strike him with his crystal staff, but was impaled via Neliel's lance. With a swing, she sent him flying away. Aizen flung himself back just in time to dodge a pair of narrow, green beams that struck where he had just been standing. Everyone looked up to see Jetre soaring towards them. "Sorry I'm late," Jetre said before touching the Ultimatrix dial, turning into chromastone. "But let me make up for it." Ichigo tried to take advantage of Ben's arrival to strike Aizen, but Aizen quickly blocked it. Chromastone fired a beam at Aizen, who responded by creating another barrier. Chromastone leaped forward before Aizen could disperse it, grabbing the barrier and absorbing it. "Thanks for the energy," Chromastone's horn lit up, shooting a beam into Aizen. Diamante leaped up at them only to be thrown away in the opposite direction by Harable's Cascada. "We'll keep them from interfering," Harable countered. "Thanks, Harable," Chromastone called. "Good luck." "You as well," Harable said before flying after Diamante. "All right," Chromastone raised his fists. "Let's end this once and for all, Ichigo." Ichigo grinned behind his mask. "You got it." Aizen smiled at the Crystal Sapien. "Welcome back, Benjamin." "Back and fully charged," Chromastone said proudly. "You're going down, Aizen, for real this time." "A brief rest, and you've suddenly become quite confident," Aizen said. As he spoke, the gash that Ichigo's attack had created began closing up. Chromastone grimaced. "That stupid regeneration ability again." "If it's not high-speed regeneration, then what is it?" Ichigo wondered. "Oh, are you two truly that curious?" Aizen asked. "I see you were able to figure out that it wasn't high-speed regeneration. Not that I would ever undergo holification. No, it is simply the protective instinct of a servant toward their MSTR." "You lost me," Chromastone mumbled, Ichigo not faring any better. Aizen grabbed the right side of his coat and pulled it open, revealing not only a bare, muscular chest, but also something in the middle of his torso, a familiar black orb. Ichigo and Chromastone's eyes widened. "The Hagyoku?" the Crystal Sapien exclaimed. "But how? Doesn't it just turn hollows into a rancor and stuff?" "Oh, it can do far more than just that," Aizen said cryptically. Before Chromastone could demand elaboration, Aizen put a hand on his wound where a slight bit of Ichigo's attack actually lingered, like a living shadow. Aizen swept his hand along the darkness, watching as it started to fade away. "So this is your spiritual pressure, Ichigo Kurosaki? Excellent, it's very well developed. Just as I planned." Chromastone's eye widened and Ichigo's body became still as stone. "What?" he said weakly. Aizen smirked at Ichigo. "You encountered Rukia Kuchiki, and through your fight with Oryu Ishida you became aware of your power as a Soul Reaper. During your battle with Renji Aberai, you learned the power of your Zanpakuto. Afterwards your battle with Kenpachi Zaraki gave you a foothold toward gaining your Bankai. Next, you proceeded down the path to holification during your battle with Byakuya Kuchiki." Chromastone looked at Ichigo warily, the substitute Soul Reaper's eyes slowly widening at Aizen's words. You mastered holification during your battle with Grimjow, and it seems you gained an even greater power during your battle with Ulquiorra. Ichigo Kurosaki, Aizen held up his hand. All of your battles up till now have played out exactly as planned. Chromastone stared, his arms slack. He couldn't be serious, right? Unfortunately, with everything else Aizen had done so far. All my battles till now were planned? Ichigo's body trembled as his mask began dissolving. What the hell are you talking about? Ichigo, Chromastone said gently. Aizen said nothing, merely giving Ichigo that infuriating smirk. Ichigo's face contorted in rage. What the hell are you talking about? He became still as Aizen raised a finger, causing him and Chromastone to look at their foe in confusion. Do not raise your voice like that, Ichigo Kurosaki, Aizen said calmly. There's nothing to be surprised about, is there? I simply believed that you would be the ideal subject for my research, so I simply assisted you in your development, that's all. Chromastone frowned while sweat dripped down Ichigo's brow. Was Aizen talking about that potential stuff again? Didn't you find it strange? Aizen questioned. The fact that, having never seen a hollow in your entire life, you would suddenly encounter one the moment you met Rukia Kuchiki. Or how about the fact that a Jillian would be lured by the bait that Quincy used to exterminate the low-class hollows? Not even the fact that, once you started adjusting to fighting as a Soul Reaper, Rukia Kuchiki would suddenly be located and reported to Soul Society despite how minuscule her spiritual pressure was. Ichigo's blade lowered and Chromastone wondered if he was just barely keeping it from falling out of his hands. Renji Aberai, Kenpachi Zaraki, Byakuya Kuchiki, Aizen went on. The fact that you would fight each of them when your power was capable of doing so, did you not once think of that was strange? Ichigo let out a sharp breath, his eyes wide and his face pale. Aizen continued. Did you think that your encounters were fate? Did you think all of those attacks were coincidence? Hold on, Ichigo protested weakly. Did you think that your victories were accomplished by your own efforts? Ichigo blasted toward Aizen, who honestly looked bored by Ichigo's reaction, already gathering energy. Their blades clashed, sending Ichigo's attack flying away from them. He pulled his sword back for another slash, only to be caught by Aizen's open palm. Don't disappoint me, Aizen said. Your power should be far greater than this. Chromastone jumped at Aizen, who quickly sidestepped. Shakaho. An orb of red energy struck the ground near Chromastone, blasting him off balance. Aizen then moved his hands as if writing out an elaborate symbol in the air. Geki. Chromastone had risen up to one knee when his body began to glow red. Hey, what is this? I can't move. Oh come on, just how many spells are there just for paralyzing someone? Hush, Benjamin. This is between me and Kurosaki right now. Aizen turned back to Ichigo, who raised his blade back at him. Now then, it seems to me like you don't believe what I'm telling you. Of course I don't, Ichigo retorted. But I've told you nothing but facts. You're lying, Ichigo yelled. All my battles so far have been because of you. You staged all of them? Why the hell would I believe something like that? You said it yourself back then. You said you had discovered Rukia after she had disappeared in the living world. Now all of a sudden you're saying that you've known about me ever since I met her. That doesn't make any DMN sense. How amusing. You yourself said that I'm lying, that you don't believe something like that. You say that what I'm saying now is a lie. Yet what I said in the past is the truth. Ichigo felt a weight in his stomach. Chromastone struggled as best he could, wincing as he couldn't budge an inch. It's completely understandable, though. You have my sympathies, Aizen said. In this world, there is no such as truth or lies. There never has been. There are only cold, strong facts. Despite this, all beings who exist in this world only care for the facts that they want to believe in, the truth that is most convenient for them. They do this because they have no other way to live. Regarding the powerless majority of this world, however, it's the facts that are inconvenient to their self-affirmation that are the actual truth. Get to the point already, Chromastone snapped. All in good time, Benjamin, Aizen said, turning towards him but still glancing at Ichigo, whose stance was dropped and his head lowered. Are you aware of all the facts? Who was it that sent Rukia Kuchiki to the living world? Who was it that adjusted Renji Abarai's equipment so that it could detect spiritual pressure? Who was it that added information of your progress in the report to the lieutenants? Did you honestly think that I couldn't locate the Hajoku after 100 years since it was completed? Chromastone was about to comment, but Ichigo faintly spoke up. There's one thing I want to know. You said earlier that you believed I would be an ideal subject for your research, Ichigo said shakily. Why? What made you think that? If you've been watching me ever since I met Rukia, then tell me, when the hell did you start believing that? From the very beginning, Aizen said nonchalantly as he finally turned his back to Ichigo. Ichigo felt his anger return. Cut the bull. Do you not understand? Aizen queried. I said from the beginning. For you see, Ichigo Kurosaki, I've known about you since the day you were born. Ichigo felt the world come to a halt, but Chromastone was the one who spoke first. You what? I've known he was special since the day he was born, Aizen said. For he is the offspring of a soul reaper and... You talk too much, Aizen. A newcomer appeared in between Aizen and Ichigo. He was apparently another soul reaper, tall and muscular with short, spiky black hair and brown eyes. Around his left shoulder was what appeared to be a tattered captain's coat, wrapped around him more like a sash. In his right hand was a Zanpakuto with a red handle and a hexagonal guard. A blue tassel hung from the end of the pommel. Who are you? Chromastone asked. Ichigo was staring at the newcomer in disbelief. Dad. Dad? Chromastone exclaimed. Slowly the new Soul Reaper turned around, an unreadable expression on his face. Hey, say something, Ichigo urged him. The man's response was to move forward and heat-butt Ichigo right in the face. Chromastone's jaw dropped as Ichigo hit the roof, rolled back into the air, hit the roof again, and rolled back like some human ball. As he did, the man dashed toward Chromastone. He placed a hand on the crystal sapien and Chromastone felt his body become free again. He didn't have time to celebrate as the man grabbed him by the arm and pulled him towards Ichigo, who managed to grab onto the ledge of the roof before he completely fell off. Ichigo tried to pull himself up, only for his father to stomp his foot on his son's shoulder. Ichigo glared daggers up at his father. You BSTRD. I honestly have no idea what's going on anymore, Chromastone said. Ichigo's father looked over his shoulder at Aizen. Then he, Ichigo, and Chromastone all disappeared in a blur. Making some distance? Aizen asked aloud. A wise decision. I can see it runs in the family. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 18. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Bigby the Big Bad Wolf on fanfictionnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.